Ding!
Hey, we did it! Hi, everyone.
Hey, Fatih. Happy New
Welcome.
Year.
Happy New Year to you too, Rick. Happy New Year, Kevin, and welcome. Welcome to our
Thank you.
show. As you guys may have noticed, we have someone in the room with us today. We cannot wait to share him with you.
Yes.
How was your New Year's, Kevin?
I had a wonderful New Year. We laid low. My wife was feeling a little under the weather, so that was a good opportunity for me to remain under the covers. And that is the way I want my New Year's to be. So it was really, really good. How about both of you?
Right, nice and rest. Oh, mine was very similar to yours.
Good.
The covers recovering from long illness from the flu.
Yeah.
And I got better. I finally got better. For a minute there, I was like, oh my God, am I never going to get better?
Oh, we take it for granted, right? When we're sick, it's like you forget what it's like not to be. I remember I hurt my ankle one time, and it was like, I can't believe I've been taking walking for granted for so long.
Right.
It's a gentle reminder.
That's such a good point, because that was one of the things that really bothered me. I couldn't go to the gym. I wanted to do yoga 2 times, and the downward dog killed me. I was like, I cannot downward dog right now. And it's like all of those things, like your energy level, going to the gym, or like even eating. I lost so much weight, like nothing tasted good. So yeah, we take so much for granted until we don't have it, and then it starts messing up with your mental health too.
Yeah.
Honestly, mental well-being, I should say.
Yeah.
How you, Rick? Did you
Well,
drive
you get the cabin.
Claus?
Actually, it's starting to open up a little bit. I mean, after COVID, everything shut down, and I have a very large family, and I mean that in a great way. When we're all together, there's like, I've got 4 daughters with 4 son-in-laws with a number of grandkids, and so yeah, it was a nice little family gathering. But it's interesting, on Christmas Day, like you, Kevin, a couple of them decided that they just wanted to have a nice quiet Christmas morning. None of this, rushing over to the grandparents' place and doing all this other kind of stuff. And I really respected that. I think growing up as a kid, I remember those moments where you just got out of bed and you just loafed around and enjoyed the day, right? No must do's, right?
Yeah. Well, I think I told my wife that. I said, she's used to waking up and going to 5 different places. I'm used to waking up and going to no places. So we have both sides of the spectrum, where as a kid, I remember waking up, opening presents, and then hanging out. And that's that's my expectation of Christmas. Hers is vastly different. So we've tried to drive to the middle and figure out, okay, what's reasonable for both of us.
You're probably the poster child for that movie 4 Christmases.
Yeah. That my wife definitely is. She has a bunch more Christmases than I do. But now, since I'm married and I'm part of the family, I'm right there with her.
Yeah, part of the deal. Yeah.
So I want to just introduce Kevin for the audience, right? He's a fellow podcaster. He's the CFO, founder, and co-host of Next Level University, a global top 100 self-improvement podcast with more than 1,000 episodes and 600,000 plus listens in over 125 countries. Pretty remarkable.
Thank you.
And I should say, but it wasn't always like that. Right. And that's where I'm going to ask you to fill us in and walk us maybe a little bit through the journey that you went through and how you got to such a remarkable accomplishment.
Thank you.
What led you to this?
Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it very much. So I always throw this part of my story in because I just think contextually it's important. I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. I call her Mima. I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. So obviously that has played some role in the man you see in front of you today. But things really started happening for me in both positive and negative ways in my mid-20s. So when I was 25 years old, if you looked at me from the outside looking in, you would see a young man who basically had it all. My girlfriend was a model. I had a sports car. I had the body of my dreams. I just won a bodybuilding show. High-paying job, new apartment. I had all the things you could ever want, but internally, I was a very insecure, very unhappy, very unfulfilled human being who had no confidence and didn't really know what he wanted out of life. And my girlfriend came to me one day and she said, Kev, I want to move across the country from the East Coast to California and I want to chase my dreams. And in my scarcity, in my insecurity, I gave her every reason in the world why she shouldn't do that. And she ended up leaving me, as she should have, and actually moved across the country to chase her dreams. But when she did that, that was an initial rock bottom for me because, number one, I got my heart broken. Number two, I'm living by myself and my bills just doubled. Work was slow at the time, so I didn't know what I was going to do. And I had to start asking questions about myself. Who is going to love me if I don't love me? Here's the problem. I assumed that if I went and made more money, I would have less problems. That was what I was convinced. More money, less problems. So I said, all right, this is what I'm going to do. Next year, I'm going to make the most money I've ever made in my entire life. So that year starts, and I get a promotion at my company, and I become a foreman of the company I'm working at. So my job was in the weatherization industry. All that means is I would go into buildings and make them more energy efficient. That was my job. We worked in schools, fire stations, anything state-owned. The beauty of that is, since I was working for the state, I made anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour, depending on where I was working, so I was making really good money. So that year starts off, I get a promotion. That means I'm running the jobs, which is great. I'm traveling all over the place, making a bunch of money. Awesome. So we get to the end of the year. I opened my final pay stub, and I made $100,000 at 26 with no college degree. Awesome. For all of 5 minutes before I realized, okay, I expected to have all of this internal stuff healed. I thought this final pay stub was going to fix me. I don't feel any different than I did at the beginning of the year. My bank account is different, sure, but internally I'm not. And I realized that for most of my life, especially that year, I had lived unconsciously, just going through the motions. I have no idea why I'm doing what I'm doing. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So 3 or 4 months later, I started a podcast called the Hyper Conscious Podcast, having deep conversations with deep human beings. Loved it. I fell in love with podcasting as I was falling out of love with my job. I knew my days were numbered there. I just didn't know what else to do. So I'm podcasting on the weekends. I'm traveling on the weeks. And just for context, the previous year I spent 10 months on the road. So every single week I was living in hotels.
This was
And yeah, for work. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And these were not nice hotels. These were not, the company was, we were cutting corners to save some money on the hotels.
Yeah.
And so I realized that this job is not the end game. I don't want to do what it takes to make that kind of money. I don't know what to do here. And I start calling out of work. I start leaving the job site early. I start showing up late. And I just was miserable. I wasn't sleeping. I was eating like junk. I'm up 24 hours routinely. I was just burning myself out. But I didn't know what to do. I felt very stuck. I felt very trapped. I had no idea. I didn't feel like I had any options. So one morning I woke up in New Jersey, which is like 6 hours from where I lived. My alarm clock went off at 5:15. I sat up. I slid to the edge of the bed. I was lacing up my work boots. And that morning it felt like there was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time, and every single one was on a different station. One is saying you're stuck here forever. You're never going to make this kind of money again. If you were to leave, what would your friends think? They all look up to you because of how much money you make. If you were to leave, what would your family think? They're very proud of you for all the money you make. And if you were to leave this job, do you really think you're going to ride off into the sunset with this podcast? Like, is that really going to be our plan B? That is not a very promising thing. And in that moment, I felt that if I was to take my life, I would take my problems with me. Now, I'm very blessed that I have a wonderful, supportive group of human beings around me. I reached out to my friend, who is now my business partner, and I said, Alan, I'm really struggling, man. I am having these thoughts. I'm having these feelings. I don't know what to do. What do I do? And he said, Kev, over the last couple of years, your awareness has shifted so much, but your environments have stayed the same. I think it's time for you to change your environment. So I ended up leaving that job 3 or 4 months later and starting the interesting journey of being a broke podcast entrepreneur, trying to figure all this out. And that was 5 years ago. I think I left my job in the beginning of 2018. So I've been doing this for 5 years full time now.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Well, congratulations for that. But tongue in cheek, we all start off broke, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no matter
Absolutely.
no matter where you are, whether you're starting a brand new career or whatever, right? Usually our bank accounts aren't overflowing with money, or else we wouldn't be looking for other things to do, kind of a
Mm.
thing. But yeah, no, it sounded like you hit rock bottom. You kind of hit a bottom.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, you're on the edge of the bed. There was like television channels all going spunky all over the place. Was that? I know you said something about the hyper awareness piece,
Mm.
but where was that struggle really nested in?
I think for me, it was the fact that I heard something the other day that really resonated with this part of the story for me. My inner status and my outer status were two different things.
Hmm.
I didn't know how to connect the two. My outer status, everybody thought I was crushing it and I was confident and I was the man.
Right.
Inside, I felt terrible about myself. I
Hmm.
didn't know how to bridge the gap between my reality and my perception and what I was perceived as. I felt like I was going to have to take giant steps back. I had really attached my identity to somebody who had a lot of money. Just that certainty, that comfort, the significance that comes with that, my reputation. I had so much tied up in what I had that I was afraid to figure out and reformulate who I was. And I just think that scared me to start over. I didn't want to start over. I finally got what I wanted. I finally was quote unquote, I won't say wealthy, but I had money.
Yeah.
And I was somebody who grew up very broke and didn't really think I belonged where I was. So I think I was afraid to go back. I was afraid to lose it all and have to start over again.
Hmm.
And I would say, yeah, like it must have taken a lot of courage to
Yeah.
take that step and leave that accomplishment or that, piece of security of making that money and jumping into the unknown really with a podcast and being broke, right? Like making that choice
Yeah.
is not an easy and simple choice to make because you're giving something up, right? And I wonder, like, what was it that actually like guided you or like allowed you to take that step? Because it can be very easy, like you said, when we're scared like that, to just go back to what we know within the little bit of safety that we feel with, okay, I'm making at least some money, and then continue to struggle internally like you're describing.
Yeah. I always say that I think that day I got something very unique from my business partner. I got permission. He gave me permission, right?
Yeah.
I imagine, and I always paint this picture for the audience, what if I reached out to somebody? Many people would have given a similar answer to what I'm going to say. And I said, "Hey, I'm really struggling. I'm having a rough time. I don't know. I'm just like, I think I'm depressed. I don't know what's going on." They might say, "Kev, nobody really likes their job. I mean, this is kind of just par for the course, right? Sleep it off, enjoy the weekend. Monday will be better."
Right.
If I got that advice, I don't know what would have happened. I think my business partner gave me the permission by saying, "Well, what if you did something else?" Now, this is the important understanding. My business partner has the most self-belief out of anybody I've ever met in my entire life. He does not believe anything is impossible, to a detriment at times. But for me, I was able to borrow that belief. I literally he said, "Kev, you can do this. Like, you're going to be fine. You'll figure it out. Like, go try." I borrowed his belief. Now, luckily for me, he was there for me for the next 6 years. It's almost like I said, "Hey, man, we're going to do this together," right? So I think for me, it was that. It was the ability to borrow somebody else's belief. I didn't think I was going to be successful. I didn't know I would be where I am today. I had no idea that this was going to work out in the way it has. But I did believe that it would be worth it. And as human beings, if you want to take a new action, there's 3 beliefs you got to have. You have to believe it's humanly possible. Is it humanly possible for me to start a podcast? Yes. Right? Is it humanly possible for me to make money with a podcast? There's people who would do it, so yes. Is it possible for me to make money with a podcast? I did not believe that. Will it be worth it? I always believed it would be worth it, or I never would have gone through the amount of pain that I have. So yeah, I really think in a nutshell, it was permission. It was the permission to make a different decision that day.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I know there's a couple of camps out there, and I know a few entrepreneurs that have basically cut all ties and said, "You know what? this is my past, this will be my future, and it's almost like going cold turkey,
Mm.
Which it sounds like you did a bit, which is really taking a huge leap of faith into a crevice that you really have no idea where the bottom is or where the top might be.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to use that analogy, is that necessary? Like, you know, like I'm curious. Like like a lot of people are ease their way into something like this. Well, I'll do it part time. I'll, you know.
I think I do not recommend anybody does what I do. And here's why. Because, and we kind of touched on this, and I'm super excited to talk about this. No matter, so there's a lot of us out there that don't enjoy what we're doing, right? It's kind of like we're working on dead grass. We know the grass is dead. We don't want to water it. We know this isn't going to be the lawn that we stay on. But we assume there's a green grass out there, and there isn't yet. There's another dead grass that you're excited to make green. For me, my dead grass was my job, and the mud that I had to walk through to get to the green grass was being broke. Now, if I was 40 years old, I had a partner, 2 children, a household, and 3 cars, I wouldn't have been able to do it in the way I did it. I think you have to get very familiar with what your mud is going to be. Maybe your mud is working at an unfulfilling job for the next year and a half while you do photography on the weekends. That might be your mud, but everybody's mud is different. I don't want somebody to have to do it. You know, I was $35,000 in debt. I couldn't buy my girlfriend Christmas presents. I couldn't afford to pay rent. I don't want somebody to have to do that. Now, if you're 23, maybe that's more aligned for you, but I don't recommend anybody does it that way. And here's the other reason. I am not one of those people that thinks everybody's going to be successful. In fact, I know most people won't, because that's the way the odds work. I would hate for you to give up your entire life for something and then it not work out, and then you have to like scratch to start all over again. I think it's good to dip your toe in, because at least you learn quickly, you know what, this is for me, this isn't for me. It can be a reality check when you go all in on something and you realize, oh, you know what, this isn't the game I thought it was going to be.
That's a really important point, because I know a lot of, I know a few coaches that have gotten into, you know, it looks very attractive. It looks like, you know, a nice lifestyle, things like that. There's a potential to make some money, and they get into it. And like you said, there's some mud that has to go through it, right? And if you're not prepared, and some people call it the shit sandwich, and if you're not prepared to eat it, you know, or live with it, you know, and then, you know, when it really comes down to it, some of them have sort of self-reflected and said, you know, this isn't really what I want. And I think hats off to you, right? There's nothing worse than getting into something and then forcing yourself. It's got to be, right? I'm going to make it work. I'm going to make it work.
But it's also, I think, the important point that you just really made is that you have to see what the mud looks like for you, right? Because everybody's circumstances going to be different, right? And what is at stake is going to be different. What you're going to be giving up or putting at risk is going to be different based on what your responsibilities are, right? Yeah. So I love that point, but I want to go back to something else in your story that I picked up on that I think it's really, really important, right? To me, your story shows how much our environment matters and how much our support system matters, right? And oftentimes when we look at those two things, I think we can get overwhelmed, right? We think that we just need to take everybody in our lives and all of our environment and get rid of it. And sometimes that may work, right? But it can also just be a little shift in parts of it, right? In this case, it was your work that you had to let go of. And the other thing that I really want to point to is it really doesn't take an army supporting you for you to be able to, you know, like get the little bit of support or push that you need to take that leap of faith or you know, find the courage to step into the unknown. In this case, it was just one person, right? That was there and it was supportive and also pointed to something really important, right? Hey, you have evolved, but you are still navigating the same environment. Your environment is not matching who you are today, right? How fortunate to have someone like that in your life. And it really does take that one person that believes in us.
I'm blessed. I'm very blessed. And the other interesting thing too, and again, this is going to sound potentially hardcore, but I'll try to make sure I preface it. I have a very small circle, but I have a very small circle for a reason, because I have everything I need. I remember earlier in the journey, I would have certain people say, I'm always here for you if you need anything. And I know that was heart driven, and I know that was from a place of love, and I appreciate that. But I remember thinking to myself, there isn't that much you can actually help me with.
Right.
I mean, yeah, you're a shoulder to lean on, but I got that. I got plenty of shoulders to lean on. I don't need more shoulders to lean on. I need people to help me strategize. I need people to help me improve my character. I need people to help me get smarter. I mean, I don't need a shoulder to lean on. I have plenty of that. That's, so this is always my freeze. And again, to your point, it doesn't mean you have to cut everybody out of your life, but awareness is always the first step. Great question to ask yourself. Are the people in your life the best from your past or the best for your future? Just a question to ask yourself. I've asked myself that many times in this journey, and I had to deal with the potential repercussions of that. And sometimes I get the answer of, yeah, we used to drink together. We used to party together a lot, but this person probably isn't going to be attending our self-improvement events in the future. Okay, maybe this isn't the relationship that I'm supposed to be in. So again, from a place of awareness, I think that's a great question to ask. And then from there, you can reallocate time. You do not have to necessarily get rid of everybody. You just reallocate time. But I think for a lot of us, we're not getting the results we want because we're hanging around people that we used to hang around with for different results. And we wonder why we're not getting new results that we want. And a lot of times it is the people around you.
Right. Sometimes they are actually like to the detriment of that self-belief or self that you're trying to build, because oftentimes, like you're pointing, yeah, we were aligned at some point. We had the same interests, and then you have evolved and they may have not, or they may have evolved in a different way. And now our values are not matching, right? And so oftentimes that lack of that mismatch can come across as lack of support too, and it can really make it more difficult for us to believe in ourselves and like stick around long enough to where that self-confidence, self-belief builds up, especially when you're doing something new that you don't know if you're going to be good at it or successful at it, right? Having as much support in that sense is really important, but oftentimes even people that we love can end up crushing that for us, right? Without really, I'm not saying they do it to, like purposely, without really meaning it.
It's one of those interesting things. I watched a YouTube video a couple months ago, and I was like, there's no way this is real. The title of the video is Why You Shouldn't Tell the People Closest to You Your Dreams. And I was like, there's no way this is real. This has to be clickbait. There's no way this is real. So I watched the video because I'm always trying to think of content that we can share with our audience. Like, what is this video all about? And I think the number one point was, when you tell the people in your life your goals, they'll make fun of you when you don't accomplish it. And I was like, wait, what? That's never happened to me. Now, again, I'm very blessed. I understand that. If that is something that you resonate with, it's time to take a look at your circle. It just is. The people in your life should be lifting you up. They shouldn't be holding you back. And now let's dig deeper. Why do they hold you back? Not everybody is doing it intentionally.
Right.
It's really hard to give somebody advice on a level that you don't believe in for yourself. So I believe you both could make a lot of money as a podcaster or as podcasters. Well, the only reason I can believe that is because I figured out how to do it for myself. I know you can do it, right? It exists for you. It's very hard to believe in somebody more than you believe in yourself. That's one. Number two, subconsciously, a lot of us realize or have the fear that if somebody grows and they accomplish something, they might leave us behind. They might forget about us. And I've experienced that. I'm literally the guy who told my girlfriend not to chase her dreams because I was so afraid of that. So I have nothing but empathy for that. But again, the people in our lives are controlling us way more than we realize. And, I got quote unquote, brainwashed in a negative way, in a positive way. My business partner said, hey, you can do anything. It's like, all right, let me give this a try. But there's a lot of people saying, hey, you can't do anything. So you are the average of the 5 people you associate with, 100%.
Yeah. No, I remember we did a show a little bit about that, but I think it comes to let's just pull the title of the show up for a second here, because I think what we're talking about too is there's a notion of when it's comfortable or when you can, or because there's again an uncertainty too, right? You're attached to things like, well, am I smart enough? Am I good enough to do this? What will people think? Because I remember you even talked earlier about when you left that job because you thought things were attached to what you make. So what will your parents think if you drop this? Things like that. So there's this notion, and you brought it up in your interview when we were talking about having you on the show. This notion of self-worth versus self-belief, and I think there's a confusion between the two of them. And maybe you can clear that up a little bit, because I think one of them actually drives you into the comfortableness of, you know what, my relationships, I'm evolving, all that is changing with me, right?
Yeah. It's I had a call before this. It's very timely. And this young lady I was talking to was talking about how she has been really torn down by a bunch of people around her. And I said, let me just ask you a question. Shot in the dark, this might land, it won't. I don't know. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you? And she's like, I want to say 9, but I'm afraid you'll judge me. I was like, I was going to say 10. I was going to say you're 10 out of 10. I said, this is the problem. Yeah. Okay, you have a 10 out of 10 level of self-belief. I'm willing to bet your level of self-worth is low because people have beat up on you verbally, or in this example. So self-belief is, I believe in my own unique ability to build this mansion. I know I can do it. I'm certain. 10 out of 10. I know I can. Given enough time, I'll figure it out. Self-worth is my ability to filter and not allow the people who are going to spill beer on the rug, kick in my walls, and disrespect my home. Those are two different lives. There's a lot of people who believe in their own unique ability to succeed, but they're unable to stop people from taking their worth. They don't understand their actual value as human beings. Yeah. Now, here's the problem. If you believe in yourself at a very high level, you're going to try things at a very high level, but people are going to beat you up, and you're not going to know that it's actually taking your self-worth. If you have a low level of self-worth to start, it's very hard to try stuff because you're already thinking, I don't deserve this, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, right? So no matter what, the answer is action. If you believe in yourself at a high level, you'll take action, you'll get humbled, that's good. If you do not believe in yourself at all and you take action, as long as it's the appropriate amount of action, you'll get some sort of feedback which can hopefully break the pattern of not good enoughness. But I think for a lot of us, we don't have a high level of self-worth because we're constantly letting ourselves down. It's this never-ending cycle of, I'll do this tomorrow, and then you wake up and you say, I'm not going to do that, right? Now you're breaking that self-trust. And then it's this kind of cyclone that never ends.
It is, and it's that habitual hamster in the wheel thinking over and over again, right? One of the things that from my coaching point of view is we latch on to our belief systems, right? So if our self-belief is I'm not good enough, it doesn't matter what's going on. I'm just going to keep gathering evidence to support that.
Right.
And I don't know how many failed businesses I had. Well, I could attach that to, well, I'm just not good enough. I'm just not smart enough, right? But and I think that's part of what you're saying about your self-worth, right? Is that when you do recognize that it's just a habitual pattern, it doesn't have to drive you anymore.
Yeah.
And when you start to open it up, well, let's look for evidence that supports me moving forward, then for me, the world starts to change. At least my view looks differently. I have more clarity about purpose. I know a lot of coaches struggle with what do I charge people, right? And as soon as you come up with a figure, somebody goes, well, geez, that's way too much.
Yeah. Or way too little.
Or yeah, like, why aren't you charging more? Right?
But that's a self-worth issue as well. I've had a lot of, again, this is the interesting thing. Yeah. I've heard a lot of people say, I want to have high self-worth. Be very, very careful, because there is such thing as delusionally high self-worth. I've seen it. I've seen really? It where people will say, I deserve to charge $1,000 an hour. It's like, Based on what? Like, what are the credentials that allow you? You're delusionally high. That's dangerous too. That's a dangerous place to be too. I think the goal is to get the appropriate amount, the accurate amount. I don't want to have a 10 out of 10 belief necessarily. I want to have I want it to be in the middle. I want it to be balanced. I don't want to believe in myself so much that I don't think anybody else can help me, because that's a dangerous place. Okay. I don't want to believe in myself so much that I don't think I can get hurt, because I can, right? I think for a lot of us, we think low and high, when in reality, the balanced middle, we call it a drive to 5. I want to be humble, but I also want to be confident. I want to be intelligent, but know that there's so much for me to learn. That's a really good place to live. And I think that really is it's having a growth mindset, really is what it is. It's understanding that there's always room for improvement, but we're not terrible because we don't know it all. It's that center. It's that center that you want to try to find.
This is with self-belief, right? We're talking about self-belief.
Anything really, right? Self-belief, yeah. Self-worth, sure. Confidence. In relationships, yeah. I think for a lot of us, we think it's either high or low. Right. And that's kind of how we go through life. I have high confidence, I have low confidence. In reality, I think we should look for an accurate amount.
And also that level of confidence and self-belief is going to vary based on what you're relating it to, yep. Right? I can be a really good speaker and be a terrible writer, let's say, or like not have any sense of style or whatever it is. Like, so obviously I'm going to have higher sense of, self-belief when I'm like speaking than when I'm like trying to get creative, which is probably the opposite for me or not. But, like I'm just trying to come up with an example. Like, it's not like something that's just like set in stone, right? This number is my number of self-belief or self-worth. Like it varies, it fluctuates, even based on not just like what we're talking about, but where you're at in your life, what is happening in that moment. Are you in the middle of a massive growth, like personally, right? And like I personally am in that moment of my life. That's why that came up for me. And I always find that as I'm evolving and growing in my life through challenges or whatever it is, there's always a moment where I feel very lost and insecure, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas maybe like a month ago, I felt super confident and like at my best. But in those moments where I'm growing and I'm coming out of my comfort zone, yeah. Those are the moments that I feel, the most insecure, or like I start questioning everything. Because in a sense, you kind of lose that sense of control, right? Yeah. I got this, right? Now I'm in like uncharted territory. Am I going to be good enough for this other chapter or level that I'm stepping into? I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does. So if you think about it like a bullseye, in the middle of the bullseye, you have your comfort zone. The next ring out is the learning zone. And then the furthest ring out is the anxiety zone. This is what happens. When you're in your comfort zone, everything's, I don't want to say it's easy, but there's no reason to question your identity because you know where you are. Yeah. When you start to get into and on the external, close to when you're in the learning zone deep, that's when you're starting to say, can I really do this? So I had a moment recently where, and this is vulnerable, but I'm happy to share. I'm going to Florida to do a panel for a podcast event. Right? Now, here I am the podcaster in almost every room I go in because I have 1,200 episodes and blah, 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 blah. But I told my business partner, I said, this is different though. I'm going to be like with a bunch of other super successful podcasters. What if I'm not like good enough? Like, what if I get found out? Ooh. And I literally had a moment, and this was the first moment in a while where I was like, I don't know if I can do it. Like, I really don't know if I am ready or good enough for this. Now, again, it's the appropriate amount of out of my comfort zone. So I'm going, it's going to be fine. It usually goes better than I expect because that's just the way I'm wired. Yep. But that's an important thing is sometimes, not always, sometimes that discomfort, that uncertainty, that fear, that small level of anxiety is just a sign that you're stepping outside of comfort into learning. Now, when that can be negative is when you are quite literally hurting your own mental health because you're in so much uncertainty. But I think that's a good thing. When I step on stage, I have a moment where I have to tell myself, this is what living is. I know you're freaking out and you're sweating through your clothes, but this is a good reason for you to understand that you're alive right now. Worst case scenario, what, you bomb the speech? In the grand scheme of things, it's not that bad. Now, I've also done enough speeches where I understand that, so contextually, I know for many people that might be the biggest fear. It's still a big fear for me, but I've bombed speeches. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Well, it's and I love the bullseye, and I often use sometimes the analogy of I don't know if you're into sports or anything, but you take anybody has pointed themselves to the major leagues of anything, and they start off in the minors, and even before that, right? And they rise to that level of competency where they're really, really good at that level. Now, the minute they're recognized for their talent, right? They're pulled up.
Yeah.
Now, they were at the top, and all of a sudden now they're at the bottom, right? And but they've risen up in their level of awareness, understanding. They're evolving themselves, right? So there's always going to be, right? You're never going to be at the top immediately.
Yep.
So it's that self-awareness piece, and then as they balance themselves out, and I love that approach because I truly believe that's the same thing. It is balancing, and an overused strength becomes a weakness, right? An overused belief will become a weakness.
Yeah.
And and then you get pulled into the majors, and all of a sudden, again, you're back in the bottom. But you're evolving, and I think there's a term, I don't know, in the yoga world about sakuras, where you're actually rise to a level, and once you're sort of there, it's sort of like it's very difficult to get back down, but you're at a level, right? Mm-hmm. So you're always growing, you're always up on a step, kind of a thing. So
yeah.
But I also feel like as human beings, like it's kind of hard to always stay on this, like we're using this higher, lower, which I don't really believe in fully, but like, let's say I'm always like at my best or at the top. We tend to get really bored with that. When we're no longer, when we start doing things habitually, right? I'm really good at this. I just nail it. Like if I give 1,000 speeches, I'm not going to be sweating through my shirts or like the way I did the first time at the very, right? There's a level of comfort that builds around us and confidence, right? And then at some point, at least I find in myself and most people that I work with, when you get really good at something and you're no longer challenged, you get really bored with it. Like your level of interest and motivation also drops. So in a sense, we are wired to constantly step into the unknown, constantly get a little uncomfortable so that we can grow, right?
Yeah. I think that's fulfillment.
Right.
I think that's fulfillment. It's like, that's why I think a lot of people are I don't want to say they're set up for failure. I think if you think that you want an easy life, there's a big difference between an easy life and a fulfilling life, right? Some of the best days I've ever had have been the most challenging holistically. Mm-hmm. I woke up, I crushed the gym, I did 10 calls, and then I spent time with my wife. But like when I get to the end of the night, I am so fulfilled because I've been on a mission all day. The easiness, I don't think is what we want. I really don't. Now, again, do you want to be able to pay your bills easily? Yes. I'm not talking about the like externals of life. I'm talking about the internals. The human condition desires challenge. It desires evolution. It desires growth. And that's why it's so important when you create a new comfort zone. Cool. For me, podcasting is comfortable. Right, I've done so many episodes. Mm-hmm. So this year we had a push, and we said we're going to try to get Kev on a bunch of shows because let's spread the message, let's add value. So this year, between our show, I have another show, and then everything else I've done, I think I did 750 episodes. Wow. Now, 5 years ago, that might have killed me. Next year, I'm shooting for 1,000 because I can do it. That will be my new learning zone. So it's very important to check in with. I'm in the gym, I'm lifting this weight. That weight's easy. Add more. Now it's easy. Add more. Right. I think life is a very similar game where if you're not challenging yourself daily, you're not humbling yourself daily. And if you're not humbling yourself daily, you're probably not building belief daily either. And that's an important thing to understand.
And I think also, like, there's the other side of that coin, right? And I believe that anybody that's watching this podcast or any of your podcasts has that desire to, right? There's an awareness within them that they do feel a little bit empty. They feel there's an urge to move on. Like they have this sense of being stuck. Right. And like you had that awareness piece, right? I mean, there are people that I know that were very comfortable. Like, I know one of the jobs I had, I kept looking around, like I just hated, like I just couldn't stand. I was a part of a machine, right? So, making widgets, and but I saw people that were quite content in what they were doing. It gave them a sense of security. It gave them enough money for their family to be looked after, things like that. I just want to put that out, that there are people that are content and comfortable, but there are people that are maybe watching this podcast or listening to it are kind of stuck. What's the next step?
Well, I would say even being content, it's a fine line. And I'm glad you brought it up, Rick, because not everybody is supposed to be doing what we're doing, right? Not everybody's supposed to be doing what I'm doing. It's personal to each person. I do think two things are, I won't say required, but would improve everybody's life: growth and contribution.
Right.
And here's the thing. You can only contribute to the level you've grown, and you can only grow to the level that you decide. I think that's where a lot of people are missing that fulfillment part, where I've met so many people in front of the scenes that they're like, oh, I love life, it's great. Behind the scenes, that's not what they tell me. They put up kind of a show, because that's kind of what we're all doing, right? Like, my life probably isn't as good as you think. It's really good. I love my life, but I have days that suck. Of course, I have fights with my wife. It sucks. Like, I have bad moments, right? It happens. But I don't want to get on here and do that. I don't want to get on here and tell you like me crying in the pillow. Nobody wants to hear that necessarily. But I think that's the important understanding is, for you, maybe you're not supposed to be a number one at a company. You can definitely find fulfillment in what you're doing. I don't care if you're a custodian. One of my uncles was a trash man for 30 years. Loved it. But I do think if he was growing and contributing at a higher level, he'd be more fulfilled. That's all.
Right.
And again, we all have our own beliefs around that. So as long as you enjoy your life, that's the goal. That's what we're all playing for anyway.
Well, and that should be it, right? I mean, I just put I'm going to do a selfish plug here. I put a new workshop together. I'm going to start in a week or so, about being ruthless with your joy. And I really think that is the ultimate goal. Like, if you're not having fun, I don't care what you're doing, and you can find fulfillment cleaning windows. And we need people to clean windows. We need people to pick up garbage. But if you're enjoying it, go ahead.
Like, it's not like it changes, right? Change is part of life. It may fulfill me today, kind of going back to the point that Kevin was making, like, once there's learning, or like your awareness opens up in some way for whatever reason, whether it's an event that happens in your life, or you hit like a rock bottom, or something happens and makes you more curious to see things in a different way, in a different perspective, or open up to other possibilities, right? Change is part of life, right? So maybe you were really fulfilled at some point. And actually, we have had those moments in our lives where we felt perfectly fine with what we're doing. I mean, I started like waiting tables as an 18-year-old. I loved it. It was the best thing. Like, it was so much fun. I met so many people. I got to have my own money, right? Like, the reasons that made that fulfilling for me were very different than what I'm looking for today, right? But I have also evolved. So it's never like something that's just set in stone, and it's always going to be like that, right? Yeah. It's also the ability to mold and shift and be flexible within what we understand about ourselves as well, right?
Yeah. And it depends on what, go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it depends on what you value as a human being, 100%. 100%. And
Right.
that changes. That changes. I also understand, and I want to preface with this or just make this a point. I'm just somebody who's very, very clear on, I don't want to say the rest of my life, but like, this is what I'm going to do forever. But I also realize I have a very high level of clarity around there where I searched. I mean, I worked 12 jobs before I ever figured this out. And I tried a bunch of different stuff that I thought I was going to like and I thought would fulfill me. A lot of people say, like, where are you going to be in 5 years? I don't know. I'm not sure. I know I'll be in this seat, wherever this seat is in the world, doing this in front of the camera.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that for me, I know what fulfills me and I do it so much. Like, I am very blessed that I get the opportunity to do that, where I understand somebody else, they might be listening to this and they might say, like, what is fulfillment? I've never even heard that, or I've never felt that before. So it's very contextual too to where you are in your journey.
Yeah.
That's another important point as well. I'm very blessed because I know what I want. Not everybody does yet. And not everybody knows what fulfillment feels like to them. So that's another important thing to search for.
Yeah, and that is probably what I know from the coaching side is a very hard answer is, what do you really want? What do you really want? Well, I know what I don't want. Right?
Yeah.
It's much easier to define, right?
But that comes with what, he's talking about clarity, right? And that clarity, again, all of it is very fluid. That clarity may be here today. It may not be there tomorrow and a year from now, especially if you start feeling differently about what you're doing, is because something within you has changed and evolved, right? So, and we talk about this often, going back and always like doing a little bit of taking inventory and checking back in with ourselves. Is this still what I want? Is this still aligned with me? Is this where I'm still going? Because sometimes that changes, but we're not aware of it. Yeah. We haven't checked in with ourselves often enough.
Yeah. So. Why is a very, very powerful question. It's just, if you can say why am I avoiding? Why am I attracted to? Why am I making this decision? Why am I not making that? That's where things really can start to shift, because you're going to be, at least you're allowing the opportunity to be more aware. Yeah. Right? If you sit with it and answer, it's why am I said this the other day on a podcast. I said, why am I insecure right now? I was being interviewed by somebody who was a space doctor. She was like a doctor in space. And I was like, how did I get here? What is happening? But I was super insecure. And in the moment, I was literally doing inventory of okay, oh, she didn't say anything. She's the sweetest person. This is a you thing, Kev. What's going on? But that's that self-awareness. Sometimes we vilify people because of our own uncertainty of the way we're feeling. And I'm as guilty as any human walking the planet. I'm just trying to get a little bit better at it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like how you really pointed it back to it's a you thing, Kevin.
Yes. Unfortunately it is. Sometimes it'd be easier if it wasn't, but then again, you can only control what you can own, really.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So the same question is important to, for you to ask yourself if you're not feeling confident, if you're not feeling like you believe that you can do something, right? Really, the question is that, well, what about this makes me feel so insecure? What about this makes me believe that I can't do this? And sometimes, actually the answer is not as philosophical or intellectual as you may think. Just you haven't done it enough fucking times. Do it enough times and you will build that self-confidence, know? But we sometimes we can also take that and find something really wrong with ourselves. It's no. You just need to do this a few more times and that will shift naturally. And going back to something that you also pointed to, just make sure you don't take too big of a step, because if it's too freaking scary, guess what? You're not going to jump, right? So start jumping from a little bit lower, take the jump, and now you can swim and you're in it, right? And then you can go a little bit higher and jump from further up next time.
Yeah. We got to be very careful with who we take advice from. Because I think a lot of the people that we're taking advice from, they're saying, you shouldn't fear judgment, just do it. What are you waiting for? It's look, some people that's good for. That's great advice for some people. For other people, that's not the advice that would serve them. And I think sometimes the people who make it to the top of the top forget what it's like to not be there, or they're not the type of person that's struggling with the stuff that they're actually talking about, which is just it's a weird thing. Like the last thing I ever want to do is say you should never fear judgment. No, I fear judgment. If you don't fear judgment, then it's not courageous to talk about not fearing judgment. So yeah, to your point, it's like you have to understand that the advice oftentimes that's best for you, it might be the stuff that you don't want to hear. But you got to make sure it's coming from somebody who understands what it's like to be you. Because if they don't, the advice is kind of useless.
Or qualified.
Yes.
Advice,
Yes.
what you're seeking advice for.
Yes.
We often go to our loved ones and it's like, oh, well, I went to my mom for finance advice. Like she knows nothing about finance. And it's like, we don't really think about things in that sense, right? It's like, what is this person's background or experience with this? It's important, and there's nothing, it's not about dismissing the people that we love. It's about, well, I wouldn't go and ask a math teacher about writing, right? Just go to the appropriate person. Make sure that the person that you're reaching out to, looking for support from, can actually give you the appropriate support.
100%.
Right.
Yeah. No. And everybody has a different level of understanding. I mean, you can put two people in the same room under the same circumstances, and they both have different experiences, right? Mm-hmm. And I know you have some appointments and commitments, but I think for me to learn not to be afraid of my experiences, to face the fact that I'm feeling fear right now, I'm feeling insecure. Okay.
Right.
It's like, okay, life is a contact sport, right? I'm going to feel something, and
that's feedback, right? We tend to
100% feedback.
Like now we're putting ourselves down, and it's like we're like increasing the volume on the self-criticism instead of being like, well, what about it? Like instead of having compassion, oh, that doesn't feel good. What about this is making me feel this way, right? Yeah. It's a slight shift, but it's a massive shift in mindset, right? I want to pull out. Hi, Zorida. Thank you for being here. I like what she wrote here. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, we ended up talking about environment so much. If you look at your circle and you're not inspired, you do not have a circle, you have a cage. It's very true. Very, very true.
Nipsey Hussle, rest in peace.
Yeah. So Kevin, what's next for you? I know you've got some
1,000 episodes.
Yeah, another 360. Well, yeah, 1,000 next year. For us, it's really about just getting better. I'm somebody who's fairly hard on myself when it comes to just getting better, but I have a belief that the better I get, the more impact I can have. And that's just really, for me, it's like, I just want to get better. I just want to help as many people as I can. And that's really what it's about for me. And I think that'll bring us more success in the podcast. That'll bring us more money so we can pour back into the business. Yeah. But in, a year from today, I'll be doing the same exact thing with maybe you, who knows, maybe you two will be doing it again. I don't know, but I'll be doing this forever. That's my goal, for as long as my voice and my body will allow me to.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And I know you had mentioned this earlier, not today, but when we were, chatting before the show, you're all about service.
Yes.
Like the first thing I was impressed about, was your giving attitude.
I appreciate it.
And it comes out in spades, right? So it's like, Kevin, all the very, very best for 2023.
I appreciate it.
Well, I want to know, what is the other podcast that you have? So one of is called Next Level University, right?
Yep.
Podcast.
Yep.
And what is the other one? The other one is just yours?
The other one is just mine. It's called Podcast Growth University. I figured at this point, a lot of people ask me about podcasting. If I don't have a podcast about podcasts, I'm not a true professional. So yeah, I just started that, I don't know, the middle of last year. That's been interesting. It's interesting to start over and go back. It's a very important perspective for me not to be a top 100, X amount of downloads. Like, that's good for me because that's perspective. And that, again, I think that keeps me humble. And I appreciate the kind words, Rick. I just want to be the person I needed. That's it. Like that's my goal. And I remember what it was like to reach out to somebody and them just not answer me because I couldn't pay them. I don't want to be that. Now, yes, we have to make money as a business, but that's my goal, to be the person I needed and to be the most extraordinary version of me possible, but never forget what it was like to start. I don't want to lose sight of that because everybody's somewhere different.
And that's your balance.
You're giving back. You're giving back, and you're also, giving the solution, sharing your knowledge, sharing your experience with the person that you were 5 years.
Yes.
Right? Love that.
It's full circle.
Full circle.
Full circle.
Love it. Love. So is that the best place for people to find you? I will put all your information in the chat here, but so like your podcast, right? Your website.
Yep. I always suggest the podcast. I think that's the best place. I mean, you're going to learn about us. We do 7 episodes a week, so you'll learn about us pretty quickly, whether or not we're your type of people. And, I know a lot of people say, oh, go check out my coaching or all that. Just listen to the podcast. That's the best place to figure out if we're your type of people.
Right. I agree with that. I think even as a coach, it's like, well, you can go on a website and read about me, or you can just come on the podcast and hear me talk, right?
Yep.
And get my perspective on things and get an idea of who I am, right? Because this whole coaching thing is a very personal, it's a personal match, right? If we're not a match, then there's...
It's creating relationships.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the goal, right? I don't want somebody to just give me money. I mean, it's nice, right? Money's nice, but I want to
qualify.
If
I can't add value, it's not a win-win. It's got to be a win-win. If it's not a win-win, it's a loss.
Yeah.
Or feel driven by it. Feel like, passionate about it.
Yeah. 100%.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Kevin.
My pleasure.
Such a pleasure to have you on. Beautiful conversation. I love how it evolved. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
Story, being vulnerable, letting us know you put your head in the pillow sometimes.
We all do.
Yes, we all do.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's a wonderful dynamic you have, and 2 hosts always keeps me on my toes. So it's a good challenge.
Ping pong.
It's a good challenge, but I'm grateful. I appreciate it. And I'm very grateful for both of you as well.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks everybody for watching.
To getting to know you better moving forward.
Likewise.
Bye, everyone.